earlier in the week, we came across, Magenta and I came across this article, this piece of information. Aotearoa plummets from 2nd to 53rd in global tobacco industry interference index ranking. Now that says to me how big tobacco interferes with their money in your country. That's how I read it. One of the contributors to that research article was the co-director of the ASPIRE Aotearoa Research Centre and also a doctor from the Department of Public Health at Otago University. We want to welcome to the show Dr. Jude Ball. Jude, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you with us.
Kia ora. Lovely to be here.
How I've just paraphrased that, what this reads to me as is big tobacco interfering in our politics and society, and how much we or the gaps in society we allow them to get in to cause trouble. Is that a fair paraphrase, or what am I missing?
I think that's pretty reasonable.
Okay.
So just to give a bit of background for your listeners, the Global Tobacco Industry Interference Index, it's been around since 2019. So like the name says, it's a global thing. But in each country, there's a civil society organisation that produces a country report. And in New Zealand, that's the Cancer Society. So they've been doing that every 2 years since 2019. And there's a kind of set methodology, set questions that they answer, and a set way of scoring so that different countries can be compared against each other. What the results show, I mean, it's not going to be a surprise to anyone who's been keeping their eye on the tobacco portfolio decisions over the last couple of years. And yet it is kind of shocking to see it all laid out in one document with a score that really shows how far New Zealand has fallen.
So Cancer Society does it for us in New Zealand. Group X does it in Australia. Group Y does it in America. And then do they all get collated because they're the same question, so they're giving the same answer? How do you find out? What's the kind of question you ask to find out, are these guys interfering in our society? Like, what kind of question is that gets asked to get that answer?
So there's, I think, 6 different areas. So they look at things like, does the tobacco industries have kind of corporate social responsibility stuff that they're paying for in a country? So that's something where New Zealand's pretty clean. We don't have the tobacco industry sponsoring stuff here. Yep. But other things are like unnecessary contact between government officials and the tobacco industry.
Struth. You mean like all those guys that used to work in the tobacco companies or lobbyists that are now literally in Parliament?
Yep. Goodness, so that falls in a category as well. Whether there are any financial benefits from the government to the tobacco industry. So 50% tax cut for Philip Morris falls in that category.
Wow. We've kind of said for the last probably 18 months, it's going to be strange. And look, I know that you're an academic and me and Chewie are just a couple of rodeo clowns from Dunedin. So anything we say that you don't want to comment on, obviously feel free, but it just feels that this government, at the end of their first term, its legacy is going to be the people happiest with them are big tobacco, petroleum with what they've done with EVs, and the mining companies. And I'm like, to get to the end of a term and have those 3 groups think you'll just be a really, really good government doesn't say much about this government, in my honest held belief.
I think you left out landlords from that list. But yeah.
How did we forget that?
Sorry. I'll do my penance later. Chewie, what are your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I knew that there would be something out there measuring how much we've changed and how much we're going in the wrong direction. I did not expect it to be such a incredible drop. It's so stark, and I think as soon as you said, it measures how close the relationship is between these companies and legislators, and it's like, well, the phone call's coming from inside the house, so that 100% makes sense that they might as well set up a Philip Morris office outside the caucus room at this point.
Yeah, I think when you've got tobacco industry executives invited to the swearing-in ceremony at the Governor-General's house, and photographs with members of Parliament, that's really concerning.
I think that office you're talking about, Chewie, is going to be set up just beside the new FBI office. They're probably going to be on the same corridor, those two offices. The index or the report talks about the revolving door. And the revolving door, I assume, is like the Chris Bishops of this world, who was a lobbyist and now is in government, and literally revolving in and out. Is that what that explains and describes?
Yep, exactly that. Yep. So there are people who are quite high-ranking officials in New Zealand First who are now quite high up in tobacco industry. And there are many people who have lobbied on tobacco industry issues, not necessarily within tobacco industries themselves, but in organisations like the Taxpayers Union or the New Zealand Institute, who are funded by the tobacco industry. Then they get in quite senior roles as press secretaries or senior advisors. So there were multiple situations, multiple examples of that in New Zealand.
As an academic, especially working in public health, what does this make you feel? Like, I mean, we can go right back to what feels like day one of this government, when for no apparent reason, with no mandate and no saying we're going to do the smoke-free 2025 disappeared. I mean, that must have dropped us from second to 40th, like overnight sort of thing. But as someone who works in public health, obviously, cancer caused by smoking being so prevalent and stuff, how does it make you feel? How do you react to this kind of legislation that leads to? And it's important to say that, we said this last night, legislation by this government that's led to this. This is not one of those graphs where you can see from the last government it's kind of continued on. This is these guys changing laws leading to this result. That's fair, right? And if it is, how does that make you feel?
It's gutting. I mean, my job for the last 11 years has been creating evidence to make evidence-based policy. And this coalition's, in the coalition agreement, they signed up to evidence-based policy, but that is not what we're seeing. Certainly not in the tobacco portfolio, and not in other portfolios either. So there's a pattern of rejecting advice from officials, which is based on evidence, and choosing another path. And in this case, the government have gone against the advice of Treasury, Ministry of Health, other health advocates like ourselves, and the decisions that they've made very much align with what the tobacco industry wants, which is hugely problematic, because what the tobacco industry wants is to sell more tobacco, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the big question of the day would be, why are these guys doing this? Why is this government bringing in legislation and giving space to these companies and this product that's sent us from second in the world to 53rd? You got any opinions on that?
I can't read their minds. I've got no idea what's going on there, but I think it does speak to integrity and values. I mean, public policy, it's kind of in the word, it should be about serving the public. Public policy should be good for the public. And yet, in the tobacco control area, we're getting policies that serve the tobacco industry rather than the public. And
Shall
that's
we?
important.
Oh,
You've got feelings.
I laugh about how much I tried to avoid saying this word at the start of the term, but it is corruption. It is corruption. Like there's no other answer for it in my head to go against expert advice, going against a multi-decade plan stretching over multiple governments, that we need to put a lid on smoking. To the point where what we were doing was looked at as the right way to do it by a whole bunch of overseas countries. To suddenly just flip that at a time when you have so many in government, out of all three parts of the government, all three parties in the coalition have ties to the tobacco industry as a whole, and then it just so happens that they're chucking the plan out the window. it's laughable how out in the open this is, and I think that New Zealanders have a complacency that corruption is something that can't happen here, and it is happening. I don't
Yeah.
see another reason, another excuse for what has happened here.
Yeah, I think we've learnt from the other big story that's broken in the last couple of days that when there are serious allegations made, it needs to be independently investigated straight away. And there are many organisations that have been calling for an independent inquiry into tobacco industry interference in New Zealand. And so far, those calls have come to nothing. But yeah, we would love to see this out in the open and dealt with.
Yeah.
I mean, another point I'd like to make actually is that the Cancer Society, they've been doing these reports since 2019. And, although New Zealand's been up the top of the rankings, we have always had very weak protections against the tobacco industry. And every report has pretty much the same recommendations. So it's been the Labour Party that ignored those recommendations for the last 3 reports. This time we've got a different government in. But I think it just goes to show, you mentioned complacency. I think there has been complacency in New Zealand. And now we see what happens when we don't have strong measures against controlling lobbying, where we don't have any, like a lot of countries ban the tobacco industry from making any donations to making political donations. For example, we don't do that. Almost every country has some kind of regulation of lobbying. We've got nothing. We're wide open. There are lots of voices speaking out about this issue, not only in the tobacco area, but in many other fields, that we really need strong measures in place to make sure that our public policy is made for the public and not for corporate interests.
Yeah, 100%.
What can we do, we being the country, not necessarily we being the people watching this show, to start going back up those rankings? Like if the Labour Party or the Greens or Te Pāti Māori or someone who would be in government in about 12 months' time, what can they be doing or saying or talking about today that would hopefully see us go from 53rd back up towards, or even up to number 2?
Well, there are a list of recommendations at the back of the Cancer Society's report, so they could start with them. But in fact, ASPIRE has a members' bill called the Tobacco Transparency Bill, I believe. It's in the biscuit tin at the moment, which would address almost all of the recommendations that the Cancer Society has made. So that would be a great start.
I can see them on the site that you talked about. Recommendations on the site. We'll put this on the Facebook page. Implement a whole of government, all branches, training programs to increase awareness, etc. Increase transparency. Collect and publicly report tobacco industry data on revenue, donations, etc. Interactions with
Tobacco industry.
Oh, tobacco industry. Sorry. Should only occur when strictly necessary, etc. Mandate that governments do not provide financial aid for the tobacco industry. Exclude the tobacco industry and its representatives from consultation. Require no branch of government participate locally or nationally in any activity that constitute or could be easily assumed to be a CSR activity for the tobacco industry or associates. So it's there's quite a good range of suggestions here that have come out, and I guess now we just need to encourage other potential political parties to get on with that, to certainly put it in their mandates for if they were to get back in.
That's right.
Chewie, any last questions before we say goodbye to Dr. Jude?
Just not so much a question, just an idea I had. Like, if the tobacco industry really rates what they call heated tobacco products so much, what we call hot wet cigarettes or boiled cigarettes, maybe that should be the only tobacco product that's available. Just make this shitty product the only one until people go, no, I don't want a hot wet cigarette, thanks. And that I think will finish it in just 5 years or less. That's my big plan.
I don't like your idea because there's no evidence that heated tobacco products are any safer than regular cigarettes. And you're right, maybe they're not as, maybe people won't like them. but a lot of people like them in Japan. I mean, that's kind of the way they've gone there. They've banned vapes, but really gone for the heated tobacco, and they
So
are
that's their
everywhere
only
in
option.
Japan. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd rather
Hey-
just get rid of tobacco completely and just have clean
Oh,
nicotine.
100%. Yeah. Yuck.
Jude, let me ask you one question. Hopefully you can do this off the top of your head, because you said there's no evidence, yeah? If you were to pull out, like, elevator pitch, you haven't got a lot of time, you want to pull out one piece of evidence that most strongly kind of backs your narrative, your story, especially in public health, than what the government is doing. Is there anything that comes off the top of your head that is like that one or two things that is the most important for us to understand, or information for us to know, to counteract what's happening through this government, at least via our petitioning our own MPs, etc.?
I'm not sure if I quite understood your question, but I think something really important to get across is that, we've heard from the minister in the last couple of days that New Zealand's doing really great with tobacco control. And, that New Zealand our smoking rate has gone down greatly over the last, 30 odd years. But when the current government came in, daily smoking was at 6.8%. It's now at 6.9%. So after a decade of solid declines, we're now flatlining.
Oh,
And there are
okay.
still massive inequities. So people in the most deprived quintile smoke at 6 times the rate of people in the least deprived. And Māori are 3 times more likely to smoke than non-Māori. So we haven't solved this issue. It's still a problem. And we know how to solve it because the evidence is there. Let's follow evidence-based practice rather than ideology.
You said something really interesting there, because when they cancelled Smoke Free 2025, they then started to say, but we're really concerned about smoking and we're going to fight to continue to have that decline continue, the trend. And so you've said 6.8, 6.9, so, and you're calling that plateauing because it's only 0.1, but technically that's an increase, a very, very small increase, but technically that's an increase. It's certainly not doing what they promised as well, which would be to continue that downward trend, even if it is just plateauing. So that's really important to know.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. We'll have the New Zealand Health Survey results come out in a few days. So we'll see then whether that plateau was just a blip and it has started to go down again, or whether in fact we're seeing a continuing plateau or even an increase.
Do you have any expectations, or is it really a wait and see?
Well, it's a wait and see, but I would be surprised to see a big decrease because the government have shifted back to a very individual focus of, it's on the person who smokes to quit, and we're going to, encourage them to do that, but they're not really doing anything. And we know from experience, from research, that you need to create an environment in which people are encouraged to quit, and in which smoking, tobacco is less attractive, available, visible, affordable. And make it the tobacco industry's problem rather than the individuals.
And let's not have the taxpayers help the tobacco industry sell their product. That's a pretty big one as well, because that would be nice. Hey, Jude, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Thanks for coming on board and speaking to this. This feels like a bigger story than perhaps it's being made in the media at the moment. And we're very keen to continue to hear about this and to talk about this through the next 12 months and beyond.
Well, thanks so much for covering this really important topic.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Jude. That's Dr. Jude Ball from the University of Otago. Appreciate your time.
Ka kite.
It's I mean, like in any other week, this would be a huge story. Like I said last night, if there was any statistical change under a Labor-led government that went from second in the world to 53rd, and it was a detrimental drop, then the opposition, which would be national, then they'd never hear the end of it. Which raises the question, Chewie, where is Labor and the Greens and stuff on this? Are they making enough noise about it, or has mixed skimmings just really eaten up all of the bandwidth?
Oh, it's eaten up all the bandwidth. I have no doubt that there are people this is a gift for Aotearoa Research to raise this in the House.
Yeah.
But yeah, every news story is still untangling this mixed skimmings issue.
Yeah.
And look, I think that is a seismic story, but we
Yeah.
still need to hear about these other things as well.